Hi guys, welcome to How to Tutors, and today we'll be doing a poetry analysis of Solitude by Wheeler Wilcox. Stay tuned for more. About the poet Ella Wheeler Wilcox. Ella Wheeler Wilcox was born in the United States of America in 1850. She died in 1919. She started writing poetry at a young age, and her works highlight her belief that the world needs more kindness and compassion. Historical context of the poem. This poem, much like Wilcox's other works, contains her observation about the world around her. Her interest in spiritualism reflects effectively in this poem, so she was interested in spirituality. A brief summary of the poem. The speaker addresses the reader directly, in which she states certain universal truths. Laugh and the world laughs with. Weep and you weep alone. The poem speaks of the universal human condition in sharing joys and good times, but that a person is alone or in solitary in their tough times or times of sadness. In the first stanza, the speaker states that one must face one's problems instead of seeking happiness through others. Structure of the poem. This poem follows a strict structure. The 3 stanzas consist of 8 lines each, and the same rhyming pattern is used throughout the poem, so there's consistency. The first 2 stanzas focus on attitude, behavior, and actions. The last stanza, however, focuses on the end of one's life and struggles a particular approach to deal with this in every. Let's have a look at the poem. Laugh and the world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. For the sad old earth must borrow its mirth, but has trouble enough of its own. Sing and the hills will answer. Sigh, it is lost on the air. The echoes bound to a joyful sound, but shrink from voicing care. Rejoice and men will seek you. Grieve and they turn and go. They want full measure of all your pleasure, but they do not need your woe. Be glad and your friends are many. Be sad and you lose them all. There are none to decline your nectared wine, but alone you must drink life's gall. Feast and your halls are crowded. Fast and the world goes by. Succeed and give, and it helps you live, but no man can help you die. There is room in the halls of pleasure for a long and lordly train, but one by one we must all file on. But one by one we must all file on. Through the narrow aisles of pain. Let's go through an analysis of the poem. Stanza 1, lines 1 to 2. Laugh and the world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. World is a synecdoche, so it's a figure of speech in which a part is made to represent the whole or vice versa for people. So this world refers to people. It's representing people. The first line tells the reader that if one were to laugh, then the world would laugh with you. Happiness within oneself creates happiness in others. The second line adds a more complicated dimension to the relationship between humans and society. Here she describes the opposite emotion, sadness displayed through weeping. If you were to weep, you would happen alone. So you'd happen to weep alone. You would weep alone. It would happen. People do not flock to the side of someone who is upset. You want to stay as far away from that person. You would run even. Because when people are upset, they tend to upset the entire mood of everyone else. And no one wants to have their mood ruined. Human beings are not attracted to negativity. Perhaps for fear that it too may be shared. So maybe I don't want to experience this in negativity, and hence I'd stay away from it. Stanza 1, lines 3 to 4. For the sad old earth must borrow its mirth, but has trouble enough of its own. Mirth, laughter caused by happiness. So you borrow and you share this happiness. The poet argues that the earth, which is personification, has so much trouble and sadness that it has enough of its own. However, happiness, mirth, is rare, so the earth must borrow happiness from elsewhere. Wilcox implies that sadness is the natural state of the world. Stanza 1, lines 5 to 8. Sing and the hills will answer. Sigh, it is lost on the air. The echoes be bound to a joyful sound, but shrink from voicing care. These lines convey the same idea as lines 1 to 4. If you were to sing, then the hills would answer. You will receive a response from the world or society, and happiness will be multiplied. The word bound means big, bouncing, movements. Echoes are personified as being happy to bounce or skip in response to happy sounds. So it's contagious, it keeps bouncing and moving. In contrast, if you were to sigh, symbolic of problems, it would be lost on the air. The sound and emotion dissipate without anyone acknowledging or certainly repeating it, because no one wants more negativity. To shrink is to pull back. Shrink from voicing care. To avoid expressing sadness, the world will not share your problems, issues, or cares. The first stanza concludes with the two emotions being translated into sounds. The sound of singing will bound like a joyful echo, while the sigh will be ignored. Wilcox implies that people share joy happily, but prefer that suffering is not shared. Why would you want someone else to go through the same pain as you? So it's best not to share it. Stanza 2, lines 9 to 12. Rejoice and men will seek you. Grieve and they turn and go. They want full measure of all your pleasure, but they do not need your woe. The speaker presents another 5 statements that outline how the world at large reacts to positivity and negativity. The first line says that if you rejoice, then others will seek you out and want to spend time with you in full measure. Full measure means to complete or all in its entirety. She once again presents a contrast that if you grieve, then the same people will turn and go. These people do not want your woe, but are happy to take on your pleasure. Lines 9 to 12 continued. The speaker gives the reader some advice in the next lines that if you want to have friends, then you need to be glad. If you are not, then you're going to lose them all. Life's gall, sadness, poverty, loneliness, all things that make us bitter. Think of it. Gall is bitter. In the last 2 lines of the stanza, happiness is compared to nectared wine and sadness is compared to life's gall. The poet uses this extended metaphor to explain how everyone wants to share as much of a person's happiness as possible, a full measure of nectared wine, but they will be forced to experience their sadness, life's gall, alone. Stanza 3, lines 17 to 18. Feast and your halls are crowded. Fast and the world goes by. The speaker presents a final set of comparisons between a happy life and a sad one, and the reactions they provoke. She uses another comparison. A feast celebration can bring people together. Halls are crowded, emphasizes that everyone will join in the celebrations. There'll be no empty spaces. Everyone will want to join and celebrate. However, fasting is private. People may not be aware that you are fasting, therefore the whole world would not take notice or join you. These 2 examples are metaphors, comparisons basically, for everyday life. Welcoming community, companionship, and happiness are going to inspire even more of the same. The poet argues that if you do not participate in life and happiness, if you fast, people will ignore you. They would not want to spend time with you. Fast and the world goes by. Everything will pass you by. Stanza 3, lines 19 to 20 continued. The speaker refers to life and death and the way that humans deal with pain. If you are successful and give generously to others, not only material goods, but also if you give yourself emotionally, you will live a good life. It helps you live. So it's a two-way street. You give and you get. No man, nobody. The poet says that literally, we all go through the process of death alone, but also implies that withdrawing from others is a metaphorical death and one that we always go through alone. So withdrawing from others is compared to death, and it is said that you go through these things all alone. Stanza 3, lines 21 to 24. There is room in the halls of pleasure for a long and lordly train, but one by one we must all file on through the narrow aisles of pain. The halls of pleasure, metaphorically, the spaces in your life that are filled with joy and happiness. So it is a metaphor. A large and lordly train, the procession of people that follow and are aristocrat, or royalty. Happiness is metaphorically compared to a house with big rooms, roomy halls that can hold many guests, a large and lordly train, where people enjoy having parties, halls of pleasure, while pain is compared to a narrow aisle. It's restrictive, which implies a corridor that people have to move through alone. In these lines, the poet says that happy people attract others and have large and loyal groups of followers. This contrasts to the next two lines. File on, walk into a place in a line, one behind the other, aisles and narrow passage between rows of seats. The poet describes pain as a narrow aisle. This metaphor implies that people can only survive pain on their own. Others can only watch them, but cannot experience their pain with them. We must all implies that everyone will suffer pain, and that the journey through pain is ultimately one that everyone will have to make on their own. Let's go through the themes of the poem. Happiness, pain. Throughout the poem, the speaker states that one must face one's problems head on and not seek comfort in others in lieu of addressing one's problems or issues. She states that we cannot run from our problems forever. Another theme, individual versus the outside world. The relationship between these two concepts is clear in this poem. The poem acts as a map to the individual and how to create your own happiness and face the realities of the world. Wilcox makes it clear that she believes that all people exist in a state of solitude. Life needs to be tackled with practicality and self-reliance. This poem is about how people respond to the emotional state of others. Happy people tend to attract the company and friendship of many others. Sad people tend to become isolated and lonely because people tend to shy away from negative emotions. In the final stanza, the poet explains how everyone must ultimately go through pain and suffering alone. Although others can bear witness, this experience is inevitably a solitary one. The poet is not necessarily saying that people are selfish, just that a person can observe others' deepest feelings, but cannot actually experience them. Contrasts in the poem. In this poem, it is clear that happiness will draw people to you and sadness will isolate you from others. Although the poem suggests we must bear our own hardships alone, we should realize that happiness and grief are parts of the human condition, and we must remain steadfast and resilient in the face of that. Tone. On the whole, the tone is melancholy, sad, depressed. Although the poet reminds us that happiness is possible, this is the connotations of the words and phrases like laugh, sing, rejoice, nectared wine, and halls of pleasure, goodness. These are nice words. The poet contrasts these words and phrases with their opposites. You weep, so you laugh, but you weep. You sing, and then you sigh. You rejoice, but then you're sad. Nectared wine, life's gall, right? Halls of pleasure and the narrow aisles of pain. So each word or phrase has a contrast. Poetic devices found throughout the poem. So we have a synecdoche, and this is shown through the word world. So in this poem, when we're referring to world, we're implying people, basically. So we're referring to people. The word world refers to people. This is sustained throughout the poem. Extensive use of personification gives the poem a personal and intimate feel. Sing and the hills will answer. The poem is built on opposites, contrasts, laugh and weep, rejoice and grieve, pleasure and woe, feast and fast. This emphasizes her message. The regular rhythm in the poem creates necessary and dramatic pauses in the reading of the poem. Right, guys, that is it for Solitude by Wheeler Wilcox. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And do check out the description. I will leave a link where you can download the slides and PDF for the full poetry analysis. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.